GEO's bargaining team for the 2016-2017 contract season. So I'm happy to welcome you all to this event. U of M works because we do, graduate workers and GEO at the University of Michigan. Before we get started, there are the requisite thank yous to make. Of course, many thanks to the LSNA Bicentennial Theme Semester, the Eisenberg Institute for Historical Studies, the Department of History for generously sponsoring this event. Also many thanks to the Graduate Employees Organization for publicizing the event and mobilizing folks to get here today. Many thanks to Scott and Sandy, who I'll introduce in a moment, for making time to be in Ann Arbor. And many, many thanks to Howard Brick, who first planted the seed of idea of this event in my head about a year ago. So thanks very much for that, Howard. I'm glad we can all be here today to think through some of these questions. So today I'll also note, just before we start, as you all know, today is April 4th, and it is the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s anti-war address, Beyond Vietnam. For those who may be interested, there'll be a public reading of that address tonight, directly following this event from 6 to 8 p.m. Downstairs in Haven Hall, room number G632. So it may be of interest for folks who are interested in continuing these conversations about connections among racial justice, economic justice, and solidarity. So I will first introduce our two speakers, who will then provide their own personal histories, recollections, and thoughts on early GEO organizing history. I will then return to the podium and give you all an update about where GEO is at today, give you an overview of this year's contract campaign, where we are now, and where we have to go in the coming days. So we'll start with Sandra Silverstein. Sandy is a professor of English and director of the, is it Matsell program? Matsell program, thank you, at the University of Washington, where Alaska faculty are not unionized. But she has served in the institution's closest approximations. She's been chair of the Faculty Senate, chair of the Arts and Sciences College Council as well. An applied linguist, her recent research has focused on the discursive construction of the nation and citizenship in times of international and national crises. Her books include War of Words, Language, Politics, and 9/11, and a sequel, Language, the New President, is forthcoming. So we'll first hear from Sandy, and then we'll also hear from Scott Schneider. Scott is an industrial hygienist. He has worked in the field of occupational health and safety for the past 36 years for a variety of labor unions in Washington, D.C. He's primarily worked in construction safety and health issues. He got his master's in biology from U of M in 1976, and then went on to get a master's in public health from the University of Pittsburgh in 1980. He's a member of Laborers Local 11 in Washington, D.C. So I'll turn things over to Sandy, who will get us started.
It has turned green. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for that invitation. Scott and I have this sort of, we're both the path not taken. So a lot of people who founded GEO went on to become labor organizers, and I did that for a while, and then other people remained academics. So what I want to talk about is the history of GEO and talk a lot about the issue of intersectionality. And I'm going to use that term in this sort of theoretical way that a lot of activists use it now, and also in more general ways. And I also want to say that, when you become a political person, you begin to understand the notions of structural and systemic causes of the things you're seeing. But I also grew up with a mother who thought that all history was gossip. And so I'm going to try and do a little bit of both. Let me see. Okay, I may need Scott to come. Okay. And this is not a, sorry. Okay, so what I'm going to do is talk about the founding of GEO, sort of to the strike, and make some remarks about that. And then I want to come back and talk a little bit about critiques of the strike. And Scott has a lot of experience to talk about during the strike. A lot of you probably know that there were these administrative aggressions against TAs in the summer of 1973. Essentially, the result was to cut TA salaries in half. Not only did people lose in-state tuition benefits, but spouses lost it as well, which was hugely important for a lot of people. And this was at a time when tuition was raised. So you didn't get a stipend and your tuition was waived. And people often said that if the university had only done one of those things, they might have gotten away with it. But people were kind of beside themselves, as you can imagine. That's a nice way of saying it because I'm being taped. Somebody in the math department, a TA, Joe McKenna, put leaflets all over campus calling for a meeting in the middle of the summer. We had a meeting and we decided that we'd have a second meeting, and if 20 people showed up, we'd keep going and we'd start organizing the organization. We had 19 graduate students and 1 undergraduate, and we decided we'd count them and keep going. And there are a series of mantras that I want to talk about of sort of what we felt like we discovered during this organizing campaign. And the first one was to set realistic goals. And I'm going to talk about Ann Bobroff, who was the head of organizing, because she was such a gifted organizer. But she was one of those people who had this sense of how many people did we realistically need to do what? And then she could usually tell you within 10 people, even if it was a 400-person mass meeting, who was going to show up. So I think that it would have been easy to set something really unrealistic. You know, we believe the whole campus, if 50 people don't show up, we shouldn't do it. You know, or we could have said, oh, only 20 people came. But so it's really important to have this sense of how many people do you need to know the possibilities, and that you're always looking forward. And my notes say math urged for an organization. It may have just been Joe, and I may have been being polite. But anyhow, math argued for an organization rather than a union. And I'm sure a lot of you hear this, or those of you who are in units who are trying to organize do. It's not necessary. We can just have gentlemen's agreements. If the university says they'll do this, they will, which did not happen in those few years. We're professionals. Union men are, sleazy. We don't want to be like. It was very classist argument. We're professionals. We don't need a union. TA-ships are apprenticeships, which is what we were always told. And you don't want to have an adversarial relationship. Professionals don't have an adversarial relationship. That was the argument that led us to found an organization. And Joe kept meeting with the dean. And so finally we said, if you don't stop meeting with the dean by yourself, the radicals are going to take over. Now, in fairness, Joe didn't believe in unions for a different reason. He was Irish, and for him, unions were too sort of staid an establishment, and that the only way to really win anything is if the membership is always mobilized. So, in fairness, it wasn't, he had an argument, but it was culturally based, we felt, in a different location. So, in about October, I took over. And we sent a letter, which I have to, so now we're going to see if the document camera works. How do we go back and forth? It may not be worth showing, but I'll show you at least one of these because I have the archive. Okay. So we sent a letter to Alan Smith, and saying that we want to put on record our dissatisfaction with the current university policy regarding employment conditions of teaching fellows. Specifically, we're mandated by a substantial number of teaching fellows from several schools to demand redress of grievances, among which are, and we wanted the cost of living increase of 10%, which, by the way, the TAs at UW just won for 3 years each. Because they renounced. a reinstatement of all benefits, an effective return to last year's in-state tuition level, and beginning in the fall term, payment consistent with a living wage. So we very quickly set a series of demands, and we had a mass meeting in November that set up a steering committee to have negotiations with the university. And what a lot of people didn't understand is legally they could negotiate with us. In other words, to be a union, we had to go through LERC, but it would have been legal to negotiate with us. And the feeling was that there had already been a group of people of TAs trying to organize. They had established what the bargaining unit was, TAs, RAs, SAs. But they were never able to move forward. The residents in the hospitals weren't able to move forward because it took so much time. The university had all of these legal resources to just keep us in legal limbo for long periods of time, and so people felt as though legally they can recognize us, and they should, and that we may have to strike in order to get that kind of recognition. And so the second mantra was, if you think you're going to have to sell something difficult, say it as early as possible. And that was news to us, because we thought, like some people thought, we might have to strike to do this. And people said, don't say that yet. Get people used to, it's not clear we're going to get very far without a union. And people would say, don't say that yet. People will be afraid of those words. And so one of the mantras that we were persuaded of, and which did work, was if you think you're going to have to sell something difficult, say it as early as possible, be as honest as possible, let people debate it, get used to the idea, see what it means. And we were really radically democratic. In the winter, the university refused to negotiate with us, and then the University of Wisconsin TA Union visited in January. Sorry, I'm supposed to hit this. There's a top one, not this one. It should. One of them. Okay, good. The second mantra was union. They came and they said, we have a union, you need a union now. In effect, they were decertified several years later, and I think GEO is the oldest TA union in the country as a result. But we were completely electrified by them and learned a great deal. And we started realizing that we needed to say the word strike if that might happen, especially because, as we have learned over time, nothing has happened without that kind of pressure. And so the Daily had this headline, TF Group to consider strike if administration ignores pleas. So the word was out there. It was an implied threat, and a real threat. Fleming called us to set up a meeting at which he told us that they weren't going to bargain with us. And we had a mass meeting in February. That mass meeting approved a demands package, including recognition, and set a date for a strike vote, that we would strike if the university would not recognize us as a representative of TAs and negotiate with us. So in February 14th, he said, if you agree to the definition of Merck's 1970 bargaining unit, he'll see if he could hold expedited procedures. So at that point, it was so annoying that we might have to strike when there was no reason, when we had a bargaining unit. We could have moved forward. So here's the gossip part a little bit. I'm actually quite phone phobic, but I was so annoyed, that's the polite way to say it, that there was some, university directory, and the president's house was in the directory. And I actually dialed this phone number, and the president answered the phone. And this was like a Saturday morning. you know, and so it was one of those things where you actually, it is one of those moments where you actually catch someone in their own logic and they have to agree. And so, you know, I say, if we can accept the bargaining unit, will you raise any objections? And he said, well, I can't tell you that positively at this point. But, you know, we've agreed that TAs are workers, and we've agreed on the bargaining unit. So it's like, so there's no reason not to just, you know, have an election and recognize us. And he told us to call back on Monday. On Monday, he said there's no reason for a hearing. And there's a letter, which I won't torture you into me turning it back into the document camera. But there's a letter from the university attorney 5 hours before the mass meeting saying that they have no objection to you know, having the Merck election. And so we started a strike vote, and we had this moment of clarity where we had certification cards at the polls. So it didn't matter if the strike vote won. It was no longer clear it could win because there was no reason to strike, because we had on paper that, you know, they would allow us to have an election. And so by April 1st, we had a union. So one thing so I've gone, that whole suitcase is filled with assorted papers from those first 2 years. And one thing that stood out to me was this sort of proclivity for satire that we had. So there was a group that called itself the Radical Caucus, and we sent a petition with 130 TA signatures. And Scott, I have your signature on it. It says, we the undersigned wish to express our deep, warm, heartfelt personal admiration for University of Michigan President Robin Fleming. We urge the regents of the University of California to disregard the current student strike and speedily hire him. Then we had this pamphlet that I think that some organizers put out to each other, this fake pamphlet, what is GEO? The other thing is that apparently we used really bad language throughout. GEO is an organization of burnt out, strung out, fucked up, and otherwise degenerate graduate academic employees from across the university. What can it do for you? It can make you postpone your prelims, lose your assistantship, lose all faculty respect, and even flunk out of school. Unless you're forced out quickly without a degree, we can promise you years added to an already too long graduate life. And then we had these things, what can we expect to win? And Doug, my partner, is an astronomer, they were going to give him a clear night. I was going to have elevator shoes for mass meetings. And Bob Roth was going to have 60 people eager to do informational thinking starting 3 weeks ago. And then this was really quite touching. You know, what have your activities in GEO done for the university? Because people gave up so much, as you all know. You would like to give to the university, which is not to be underestimated, trouble. Secretaries are organizing, nurses are organizing, people are getting off their asses, I told you. And we will have a union. You did that. Feel good about yourself, congratulate yourself, no one else will. And then, I don't know if this was a typo or a technique, I feel absurd. Okay, and then, you know, there was a GEO council votes to cancel new contract in University U. In the middle it says, look, this campus is just getting too radical, said Sandy Silverstein, that's why I retired, she added. And this was, I think it must have been an April 1st daily that did a series of articles like this. And there's another one that administrators go on strike, do not thrown into a turmoil. You know, in the last column, meanwhile, the staffs went about the business of running the university with little difficulty. And there are endless ones of this. So toward the first contract, mantra 3 was don't bargain against yourself. You know, we had these conversations and they said, well, they'll never give us that. And you say, no, don't bargain against yourself. You know, you demand what it is you want and need and then figure out what's going to happen. Mantra 4, people don't strike solely out of self-interest. It took us a long time to understand that, I mean, people in the engineering school who stereotypically, you know, do not have high political consciousness, were striking for affirmative action. You know, all of these white males. And we realized that if it was only about salary, people were not going to go out on strike. They needed to strike for something that was bigger than themselves and that made the institution a better place. And whenever we understood that, we had people demanding some really quite important things. So the other thing I wanted to say was we were good organizers. Anne Bobroff, after the strike, and a guy named Mark Ferenz wrote a series, a long leaflet about organizing a graduate employee union, and sort of wrote down everything that they thought about. And I was going to show you this, but I think I'll spare you the document. But I want to just, a couple of things. Organizing, this is called the nitty-gritties, the personal aspect. Organizing is the process of getting people to do things, getting organizers to go into departments, and in turn to get other workers to participate actively in the union. It's vital to keep in mind at all times that people are willing to do things only if they derive personal satisfaction from it. She talks about this sort of individual relationships that people have to have. She talks about one method of feedback which we must be cautious against is the survey. And there's this really interesting discussion of the survey. And she talks about the fact that what the survey does is it captures people where they are, whereas people are moving. It's a very fluid situation. It says if organizing is occurring successfully, people's ideas will be in the process of changing. What is necessary in organizing feedback is to learn where people are moving, not where they've been. The survey system is much too cumbersome for this. You must rely instead on frequent reports from organizers who have personal contacts in the department. There's no substitution for that. And she talks about setting up department meetings, and one of the things she says is the most dreaded thing to do is to go into a department and talk to people. And she said, so the first rule is never go alone, which I thought is really quite sort of, I think, magical understanding. And, we have all these lists, departments with over 4 GSAs and less than 10% GEO members. We're always sort of tracking where we were. But there were these sort of remarkable people who were in departments one-on-one. And Diane Larson-Freeman, who came back here as a director, as a senior professor of the English Language Institute, was in charge of the engineering school. And she brought the entire engineering school to a mass meeting. And it was because the engineers were all isolated throughout. Nobody knew where they were. They didn't know where they were. There would be 1 or 2 spread around. And she just spent every day in the engineering buildings meeting people, getting them to trust her. And then, because it was so scary, and again, these are stereotypes, but I think they were real at the time, there were these bunch of radicals from humanities and social sciences doing this union, and she wanted them to go into that environment, to a mass meeting, and she went and brought them with her. They all arrived together and sat together with this sense of, that was, that was a safe place and could be done. In terms of planning, there are a couple of things I wanted to say. One is, for that mass meeting, I think it was the one that took the vote, we had a 14-hour meeting. We met for 14 hours, the organizing group, and we went through every possible thing that people could say and really thought through deeply, like, what our response was. And I think there isn't any substitution for planning. And I found my notes for planning the mass meeting, and it was, I hope, here. So this was called mass meeting preparation. Any rules should be at the bottom, time limits of speakers. No one can speak more than twice to the same question. Plan the agenda in terms of time, interest, and theater. People need to participate and not be subjected to, to just hear people talk at them, which I'm now doing. Do as I say, not what I do. The Constitution says people must put things on the agenda before the meeting, but folks don't have the Constitution yet. So make arrangements for getting motions to the chair. There was this sense of things are really fluid and you have to plan for fluid. You don't plan to force people to be something that they're not. Polling places have to be set up in advance and they have to be staffed. This is amazing. Try to get ashtrays. The world has changed. Okay. Anything that is a speech or longer than 2 minutes, any announcement by our people must be on the agenda, or people would think that our folks have special privileges. Get as many people to plenary sessions as possible. I'm going to skip some. You must always be in control of a mass meeting, but never let people feel like they're being railroaded. And we talk about calling the question, and then it says, think through exactly how you expect it to go, and then be flexible and roll with the punches. Don't ever look like you've lost your temper. It's really hard, you know, if more than 400 people are there, and people who, you've been planning this for 14 hours, and it's like, what's this? You want to know, do you read anything? Okay. And then it says, be honest. Ask them for help. There are a lot of us in here, so let's be patient with each other. Just, what do you think we should do? Whatever you say, remember the press is there. You do have prerogatives. If someone's arguing something from the floor and the executive committee has talked it through and wouldn't agree, say point of order very quickly. I'd like to make people aware of the rationale and arguments given in Stewart's Council or the executive committee. I don't mean to be advocating from the chair. This isn't necessarily my position. So, I mean, we just thought through so many sort of scenarios of how to be democratic and have large numbers of people actually making decisions at the same time, not having people sit there for hours, but having it move. And I want to finish this part with this notion of intersectionalities and talk about one of them with respect to mass meetings. So the first thing, in terms of intersections, was across departments. It was the only space on campus where people from different departments met each other and learned from each other. And we were stunned to discover how similar things were in almost every discipline. It didn't matter what unit. There were things that were applied and things that were theoretical. And the theoretical things always had more prestige. And generally, if there were any women in the field, they were in the applied wing of it. We talked about that a lot. The fact that University of Wisconsin came to visit us was hugely important in our moving forward. And then AFT sent me to Pitt and Buffalo to help, organize there. And then, did Robbie Cohen speak in this series?
Yes.
So, okay, so Robbie Cohen is married to my cousin. When they were in graduate school, they knew that I had organized this union. I'm not saying that Berkeley has a union because, Robbie's my cousin. But, you knew those things. And, I got this message through the family, Robbie and Becky wanted you to know that they're organizing a union now at Berkeley. So I think that when people come together from different institutions and learn how similar their situation is, it's really powerful. We were trained by the Institute of Labor and Industrial Relations, and a coalition of labor union women trained us. So there were, I said, all of these like chain smoking stereotypes of, gravelly voiced labor women that totally inspired us and trained us. We were supported initially by AAUP. They probably paid for our leaflets or something, but they didn't believe in union in those days, and so we went. Another thing that was really important was that we came from prior organizing. A lot of us came out of the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War movement, and I was a draft counselor at the time that that I was working on the union. And I was doing post-induction order draft counseling, which meant that I was largely working with working class men because middle class men usually didn't wait till they already had an induction order. So that we saw race and gender and class and issues of empire as being related and related to the organizing we were doing. And for me, what was really important at the time was that, I went on after the strike to teach for 6 years in women's studies here, but we were deeply affected by feminism. Two of the presidents of GEO, myself and Nancy Conklin, taught in women's studies. And we were constantly seeing the strife and what we were doing through a feminist lens. And it was a feminism that was being, in a sense, theoretically reinvented at that moment as the second wave of the women's movement was being developed. And one thing I wanted to show you was women's studies had to be, every department on campus has to be reviewed every 10 years. And so we got this review, and it wasn't altogether positive. And part of the complaint was there were too many TAs doing the teaching. And so, but if they took away the TAships, we wouldn't have the curriculum, and we wouldn't have had women's studies. And so we realized that that would have basically destroyed women's studies, if they didn't allow TAs. And also, TAs arguably were a lot more interdisciplinary. A lot of faculty taught courses like women and history, or women and art. Whereas we were trying to think through courses like mass movements, and how interdisciplinarily, what was women's role. So we needed TAs for a number of reasons. And we also thought, a lot of us have been through, a lot of movement organizing, and our skills are going to be lost, this young generation of young feminists. So we might as well pass on our skills with the mobilization. So the first thing we did, and this was very much a GEO thing, is we made these T-shirts that said "Save Women's Studies," and people started wearing them all over campus. And from the point of view of the administration, they weren't trying to get rid of women. Where did this come from? People really did freak out. And then we thought, we'd like to have like a feminist movement. And again, a lot of, these were mostly GEO people. And so we decided that we'd have a rally in support of women's studies, on the diet. And then we asked people if they wouldn't mind visiting the president's office with us. So we were going to have, however many hundreds or thousands of people visit. But we had like women marshals, so it's like, we're tired of these adventurous boys and these, violent demonstrations. We're going to have the demonstration, which, arguably is very biological and problematic arguing, not to mention that, one of my graduate students just wrote a book called "Nonviolence Ain't What It Used to Be." So what is or isn't militant or violent is also up for debate. But anyhow, that's how we saw the world. And so we had all these women marshals, and we had these T-shirts, and we went to the president's building. And what we didn't, and of course filled it, every stairwell was filled with people known for they, we had taken a building. And, but what we didn't know was Jerry Ford was visiting campus that day, and he was at lunch, and the building needed to be cleared by 2. And so we actually got more than we asked for. They said, we give you this free leave. And we went, oh, yeah. But that was,